Let's look at creating a Kubernetes cluster on Google. So navigate to cloud.google.com, go into your portal. We assume you have an account created. Click on the Kubernetes engine. All right. And we're going to create a Kubernetes cluster. And as per usual, there are going to be a lot of options. However, the good thing about Google is even though they give you a lot of options, they provide mostly sane defaults. And so you don't have to end up specifying a lot of stuff other than basically a name and a region on this first screen here. However, one thing you do got to think about is that Google provides two types of Kubernetes cluster. One is a standard cluster that you manage the nodes and decide how many, or the node pools, and decide how many nodes you want in each node pool, and create new node pools and add nodes to node pools, all that stuff. That's what the standard cluster does, which you can get to by switching to the standard cluster. Okay. But the other option is the autopilot cluster. And the autopilot cluster is kind of, Google automatically manages all the nodes and decides how many nodes you need and all that. So it's like kind of like an extra layer of decision making on top of all the scheduling and everything that regular Kubernetes does, and autopilot kind of puts this other stuff on top. So we've tested with both. We've tested OpenSquiggly on both, and they both seem to generally work. So you should be able to use either. The one thing I did notice is that things tend to be slower to provision in with the autopilot. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Because it has to do these dynamic bits of creating nodes and spinning things up and down and that kind of stuff. So things tend to take a little bit longer, even like something like provisioning a persistent volume or something that will take longer. The main advantage, allegedly the main advantage of autopilot is that it's supposed to be more cost effective because it only adds resources as you need them. Whereas, if you do a standard cluster with 3 nodes, you're paying for those 3 nodes regardless of whether you're running any workloads on them or not. And so it just kind of depends on, what you think you're going to need. The other thing I would say is, I don't really understand what autopilot does behind the scenes, so I'm kind of naturally a little bit distrusting of it. And, if we think about OpenSquiggly is a multi-container pod that includes the OpenSquiggly service, the MongoDB, and then the Elasticsearch database all running inside a multi-container pod. And so how much of the internals is autopilot going to be able to know, whether it needs to spin that up or scale that up or down? So I'm just not sure that I trust it all that much. For that reason, I would probably be inclined to go with the standard cluster, but for demo purposes it doesn't really matter. Either one will work, so I'm just going to stick with the autopilot cluster. I'll just call this GKE cluster 1 and put it in the US Central region, US Central 1, and create and see where that gets me. Now, as per usual, this takes several minutes to provision. It will stay in this status, with this spinner. It will stay there for several minutes, perhaps upwards of 10, 15, 20 minutes. I didn't time it, but it's a multi-minute thing. So that, anyways, that's not too bad. The fact that I basically just had to fill out 2 values, the name of the cluster and the region, and it's doing everything else for me. So That is certainly has a convenience factor to it. I will pause the video and we'll fast forward through time while this cluster gets created. All right, there we go. It looks like we've got a cluster created. Now let's set up my local terminal to connect to that cluster. So we need to do, so this is a terminal connected to my local desktop. I've got G-Cloud, the G-Cloud CLI. Notice that one of the extensions I have installed is the GKE G-Cloud Auth plugin. We're going to need that. If you don't already have that, then you'll install that by going to G-Cloud components install GKE-G-Cloud /auth plugins. All right. I've already have that, so I'm not going to do it. So now I can prove that I have it by doing GKE G-Cloud and version. So if you have it installed, you should get that. All right, and now it's really a simple matter of getting a local authenticating against that with G-Cloud. So we do G-Cloud container clusters, get credentials, and then we give the cluster name, which was GKE cluster 1, and its region equals, and that was a US Central one was the region, and I think we also have to give it a project, and this is the project ID, not the project name. And the project ID for me, well, I probably shouldn't show it to you, but it's all right. Let's see, clusters, click here, and well, here I can click on the drop down, the projects drop down, and this is the ID. And paste that in. All right, and hopefully that works. There we go. Now if I do, I have kubectl aliased to the letter K. All right, so if I go K config get context, and we see that this GKE atomic blah, 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 that is the current context, and notice the asterisk next to it, which means that it is the current context. All right, and so we're going to use, all right, so we should be good to go now, and we're going to use Helm to install Helm repo list. I previously added the Open Squiggly repository. Oopsie. And so we should just be able to do Helm install, get the release a name, Open Squiggly test 1, and we're going to install from Open Squiggly the all-in-one chart, and we're going to do set cloud type equal Google, right? And we're going to do, let's say disk size equals 5 gigabytes. All right, and let's see how that does. All right, and let's see. There's some kind of warning here, but list, right? K get storage class. There, I created the Open Squiggly test 1 storage class. So far good, so good. K get PVC. That's persistent volume claim. Okay, it's pending. Now you might think, oh, it's pending. It's stuck. No, it's not stuck. It's just taking some time. This might take a few minutes. And so it hasn't created the persistent volume yet. Get pods, and the pods is pending. It's waiting for that persistent volume to spin up. So like I said, the autopilot's a little bit slower in provisioning stuff, so you just have to be patient. This could take a few minutes before it partitions that or provisions that persistent volume. So we'll be patient and we'll wait for that to complete. Okay, there, that took 2, 3, 4 minutes or so. I didn't time it. So let's try that again. Get PVC. Okay, the persistent volume claim is bound. It's 5 gig. That's what we asked for. Okay, so far so good. Get PV. This is the persistent volume that uses the persistent volume claim. It's been bound and it's 5 gigabytes. Okay. Get pods. The pods are running. That looks good. Get deploy. The deploy is started. That looks good. Get service. This should tell us that we have an external IP address for the service. And again, be a little bit slow coming up, but there it goes. All right. So far, so good. Let me create an account and log in. I won't show that. Okay, creating an account worked, logging in worked. Let's attach a couple of quick mount points here. Quick add HTTPS github.com. We have a couple of public repos out on our Open Squiggly account. Let's do eugene.git and save another one. All right, that looks good. https://com/open/squiggly/image.get. Right, and let's add one more. Okay. Let's add the user docs. Our user documentation is public repo. We can add that, right? Refresh that. So there we go. We've got some source code mounted. All right, kind of cool. Neat. All right, good. And we've got the raw user documentation mounted, but that's the unformatted version. So we want the formatted version of it. And so we're going to go back to mount points. And we're going to do an add, and we're going to reuse the existing repository. We're going to reuse user docs. We'll call it user docs. And this time we're going to select Open Squiggly Simplified Document Tree Formatter. Save that. All right. And let's graft that into our document tree, and this should give us formatted documentation, right? And so there we go. See, so this documentation now is sort of like a dual publish from our main website, opensquiggly.com. Go to documentation. We're kind of like, that was a quick way to sort of dual publish our website. So now you've got formatted documentation. So you see, there we go. That shows a quick test of, soup to nuts, end to end, creating a cluster, installing the Helm chart, creating an account, logging in, attaching some repos. That shows the end-to-end workflow of Open Squiggly. I hope that helped. Thank you for watching.